For the final project, I chose to cover the impact of GMOs on our society. Most people are familiar with GMOs, but they're not exactly sure what GMOs are. Genetically modified organisms are organisms in which the DNA has been modified by injecting genes from another organism into that plant, changing the characteristics of the plant. Plants are altered in a laboratory where they're tested and experimented on, and then the seeds are then sent to the field where they're field tested. After that, they're distributed to farmers so they can be grown. Some of the most common GMO crops are soy, corn, cottonseed, and canola oil. Soy and corn are about 80% genetically modified in the US, and they're genetically modified to resist herbicides such as Roundup, and corn has been modified to produce a bacteria called Bt, which acts as a herbicide and helps with pest control. One of the most popular fruits in Hawaii is the papaya, and in 1997 the ring spot virus threatened to destroy the papaya crops in Hawaii. In 1998, Monsanto created a genetically modified papaya that was resistant to the ring spot virus, and Monsanto was credited with saving the papaya crops here in Hawaii. As a result of genetically modifying the papayas, the cost of papayas have gone down, as well as the consumption rates of the Hawaiian papaya. Most of the papayas consumed in the United States are from Mexico, and none of the papayas from Hawaii are able to be exported to countries such as Japan, because Japan no longer or doesn't allow genetically modified foods in their country. Over 80% of all foods on supermarket shelves are genetically modified, yet no one knows because none of it's labeled. Most consumers prefer that their foods be labeled whether or not they are genetically modified, so that way they can make an informed decision on what they consume. Despite our concerns of the possible health risks that are associated with GMOs, no federal mandates have been enforced requiring the labeling of GMOs. The only action that has been taken is from a third-party group called non-GMO.org, who approves and labels products if they don't contain any GMOs. The only other way to be safe and not consume GMOs are to consume products that are labeled organic. Because the FDA requires that all organic foods be free of GMOs. So even though a product might say that it has all natural ingredients, it still can contain GMOs because the word natural isn't regulated by the FDA. Soy allergy skyrocketed by about 50% in the UK after genetically modified soy was introduced. Closely related to GM soy are peanut allergies, which doubled in the United States at around the same time from 1997 to 2002. In some cases, getting allergic to GM soy also caused allergic reactions in non-GMO soy. Some genetically modified foods are also engineered to produce toxins, such as Bt. The Bt toxin was given to mice and showed to create allergic reactions in previously non-harmful foods. This same Bt toxin is supposed to not get into the bloodstream of those who consume GMO foods. Yet in a recent study, over 93% of toxins produced by GM foods were present in individuals who consume these foods. After the introduction of genetically modified foods, there has been an increase in the number of cases of inflammatory bowel disease in the United States. Also, the intestinal lining of rats who were fed genetically modified potatoes showed an increase of excessive cell growth that can lead to possible increases of cancer. Many of the companies behind GMO foods are transnational or multinational corporations such as Syngenta, Monsanto, BASF, DuPont, and Dow. These corporations control around 85% of the pesticide market, which is valued at over $30 billion. Because of their elite status, they also have an impact on the government and their policies. Their ability to control the food industry allows them to continue to profit despite the concerns of the people who consume their foods. This fits into the conflict perspective in which elite models are able to use their political power and impose their will on the masses. In the end, these multinational corporations are the winners, while everyone else may possibly suffer health risks at their benefit. Despite the health concerns associated with GMOs, some countries believe that GMOs might be the answer to their financial concerns. For example, South Africa can't afford to lose crops, and financially it is beneficial to grow GMOs that can survive in their arid environment. This relates to global stratification, in which the unequal distribution of wealth, power, and prestige on a global basis results in people having different lifestyles and life chances because they can't afford any other options. Overall, GMOs seem like the financially beneficial option to countries that are struggling. But a major issue that they're facing is that these GMO crops need to be maintained constantly with pesticides. The cost of these pesticides outweigh the financial benefits that these crops provide. In the end, these countries become dependent on these multinational corporations to provide them with chemical pesticides to maintain their crops. This also relates to the dependency theory, which makes poorer nations become dependent on richer nations for food and financial aid. Because these nations are dependent on richer nations to provide food to their country, they are at a risk for exploitation by these richer nations and multinational corporations. When GMOs are produced in these poorer nations, they begin to get exploited by these richer countries. Natural resources such as land and the use of their cheap labor begins to get exploited, and in the long run it doesn't create a strong economy, but it continues to weaken their economy. Other countries can't afford to even grow their own foods, have to receive financial aid from the US. And when they receive wheat and corn that is grown in the US, they no longer have a choice of what they're eating. And most of the foods that they consume and they receive are genetically modified. One of the ways that we can choose to consume non-GMO foods are to purchase organic foods, which are regulated by the FDA and are not supposed to have any genetically modified products in their foods. Another option that we have is to look for products that contain the non-GMO.org label, which are products that have been verified by non-GMO.org to not contain any genetically modified ingredient in their products. We can also fight against big chemical companies from producing GMO crops in Hawaii, and recently Bill 113 on the Big Island and Bill 2491 have been passed that regulate biotechnology in Hawaii. We can further to increase that to other islands, such as Oahu and the neighboring islands, and hopefully we can regulate GMO crops from being used and damaging the land and the environment that we live in. We can also push for labeling of GMO foods in the future, and we can continue to educate ourselves on the concerns of GMOs.